Welcome to the BPM 360 podcast. I'm Russell.
And I'm Caspar. And together we will help you navigate the treacherous waters of the BPM adoption journey. I hope you enjoy the podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the BPM 360 podcast. My name is Caspar and I'm here with my trusted co-host and friend, Russell Gomersall. Russell, how are you today, my friend?
Hi, Caspar. Fine, it's great. Turning a bit autumn-like here in Germany. So we had some great days, and then all of a sudden everything was swamped. And I don't know if I mentioned it last time, but the moles in my garden have declared war. And so that's my challenge currently. So during the summer, I think the earth was so dry they just kind of like hid away, and they were more in the circumference of the garden. But now they've gone a full attack, and very clever. They've actually going it from three sides. They're actually attacking the garden. So when I try to put up some deterrents and something on the one side, then they'll appear on the other one. So it seems like a battle I can't win. And I really like moles as an animal, but in my garden, I'm struggling to keep up my sympathy for these little buggers.
So this is literally not in my backyard story.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh,
you can do what you want to, but not in my
right?
Backyard. Exactly.
It sounds like a cartoon where you're running around with a shovel in your hand like Daffy Duck. And
seriously, the last time I was there, it was like whack-a-mole. I said, and it's like they provoke you, so you let the lawn robot run at the night, and then they kind of wake up in the mornings. I really picture them actually having alarm clocks and then talking to each other and thinking about, so what could we do to really piss him off most, and then they will all, it's crazy. It really is. It's like a cartoon. Yeah,
it sounds a bit like people you try to onboard on BPM, and then they just hide away, and then they resurface wherever you don't want them to resurface and say something stupid.
Exactly. Then in these situations when this happens in projects, I was talking to some colleagues, and we were saying so and. It's always the point that you think, are they doing this on purpose? But a lot of the time, it's just their nature, and it's just So I think it's always the most important thing not to take it personal, and to think about it professionally, and think of it from the other perspective. So so sometimes I think there is this about it. So ultimately, you're right. I shouldn't take it personally. These moles just want to eat these juicy worms that we have in our garden. I should be chuffed, and I should be honored that they prefer my garden to all the other neighbors' gardens, because I'm the only one that really has this quality of worms that actually then that hosts for these moles. So you have to say there's always two sides to the story. Always a positive side to the story. So that's I think in our projects I'm also going, yes, well, we have to see the other side, and then you see the colleagues being completely frustrated, and you're there saying, brilliant. Yes, well, there's always another side to it, and they will be most probably very busy with what they're doing. That's why they haven't managed to maintain the processes, or they haven't updated it, or they don't understand it. So there's always this aspect of looking at it from the other side, and then tackling it and being patient, and that's what I'm doing as well.
I always keep a little sign very close to my screen that basically just says, "Remember the Dunning-Kruger effect," and that very often just makes it really relevant. People say something that I think like, you're probably way left on the Dunning-Kruger curve. That's fine. I'll just let you talk, and then we'll correct you later on. It's totally fine. But that effect is really wholesome for me. But I understood, Russell, that you had actually quite an interesting topic for today.
Well, yes. Well, I just as we were chatting, I saw that on LinkedIn there's been a lot of articles from Will on the aspect of AI, and there was one thing that, especially the first one that came out, where you had this little study that said 95% of AI pilots fail, and a bit further down. So now I did comment a slight repost on it, but I didn't really dig into the details of my view on this. And I think he will, as I think we all the same from a nature. We all have our hammers, and when we're looking at problems, we see nails, and
Yes.
other people that have a screwdriver see a screw.
Yeah.
And I think actually I'm completely agree, and I think this is what we also see on the market, that there's a very different level of let's say maturity on dealing with the implementation of AI. We're definitely beyond the hype cycle, where people are saying, okay, where's the return, and how is this working? And as it's a new technology and there's a lot of hype around it, I also understand that there's a lot of piloting going on. So it's like, let's find out. And I've seen companies that are being quite sophisticated in setting up their, let's say, technical infrastructure and setting up assistants. But if you look into them in detail, I would say 2/3 at least of them are more generic. Let's use this. They give it a fancy name and they give it a bit of a system prompt, but ultimately it says rewrite your email and do this and do that. So I think that's being done a lot. And if you were to call that a pilot, I would say, okay, maybe they're more or less successful or they're being used. But then look at it from a perspective of process management. I think the real return and the real success will only be if it does impact business processes. So ultimately, there's a strategy up the top, and they say, we've got a business model, we want to earn money. So if a new technology comes along and everybody's really ecstatic about it, then as a manager, I would say, where's the return? Where is it impacting my business? And if there's something we at least preach, and that's our hammer, that we look at, then it's the process. That's where I think Will definitely agrees, and he says, but coming from his background, and then digging down into this topic more from a process mining perspective, I was looking at it and I said, no, and this is more or less our also view on the world, and say, if you want to make these not pilots, but if you want to make your AI implementation in your company successful, you have to go about it in a process-centric manner. And on this, you could say, well, why? And then the one main point is, as I mentioned, to operationalize your business, to make it more efficient, make it more economical, whatever, or even adapt to a certain thing. The business processes are the core aspect that you need to look at. Why would you then, and in the past, I think we've talked about this a lot as well, around operational excellence and process excellence. They're all about optimizing your processes. And a lot of the digital transformations that are happening, they're all about how can I make my processes more efficient by introducing technology and even standardizing with HANA down to the little nitty-gritty implementations and optimizations you do. So why, and for no reason, AI should be different. But there's one interesting aspect around, okay, so you say, well, so it's like any other process initiative. And I would say, not quite. There are some different ground rules that you have to take into consideration. One of them is that the platform itself, the technology platform, is evolving really fast. So I've done some... We've talked about generating BPMN models in the process modeling, but also analysis. And here I see that just lately, the capability of ChatGPT 5 versus 4 in some elementary, let's say, analytical capabilities, it's just going through the roof. So if you do a pilot now and you say, that's not working out very well, and the results aren't really good, then maybe in half a year they will be there. So you cannot deduct from a pilot if this is the end of the game and you can't deploy it. You have to be agile and adaptive on behalf of the capabilities of the tool. And I think that's a game changer in the way you go about these things. You cannot say, tried it, done it, it's rubbish, never again. Maybe like people that used ARIS in the 90s and still come to meet them nowadays. They say, ARIS, the user interface is really bad. You go, well, you used it in
It's a lot better now.
1995, and Windows
Yeah.
isn't Windows 3.1 anymore, and that is involved. This is one anecdote from our common background.
I'll come back to that one.
Yeah, so you really have to be adaptive on and agile and so the piloting is more an iterative, retesting and revalidating and updating your infrastructure to keep up with the capabilities here. But on the other hand, some fundamental technical infrastructures on the data availability and the quality and all the ensuring compliance and the monitoring and the governance and the ownership, these are things that are fundamentally need to be established.
Yeah.
So there are some game changers there. I mean, just one anecdote. I wanted to just to get into maybe something.
Yeah.
I wanted to do a bike race. I don't know if I told you.
A
mountain bike. Yeah, a mountain bike.
I know that you do.
Yeah.
I've seen videos of you doing mountain biking.
Yeah. So and I wasn't quite sure because then the short race was closed and the big race I wasn't sure if with my e-mountain bike if I would manage it for my fitness and the battery level, and I just took a screenshot of the elevation curve of the race. And gave it to ChatGPT. And with ChatGPT now, he is so good in analyzing images and dissecting it that he derived all the inclines and declines and calculated a race book for me when to use how much power based on my FTP and the battery capacity. That he gave me a real detailed road book how and when to exert the motor and me, so that I maximize then my pace throughout the race. Yeah.
So, but this is interesting, Russell. Very interesting. I just want to jump into that one. So the situation you're describing is characterized by a finite number of variables that are basically sticking to the laws of physics, right? I mean, you got the inclination. You know how fast the battery degrades. Depending on the power that you ask from the bike, the inclination, so you know how much power you need to get up, et cetera, et cetera. And if you translate this into let's say the corporate world, so the organizational world, where you try to fit and adjust an AI application onto a business process, there is one thing that is different. There is a human element. And if there's one thing that AI, I think, still struggles with, is with the way that people behave and the way that people make decisions, which is not predictable. You hope it would be.
A very good point you're making there, because coming back to say the application and so I was looking at this and say, okay, how much does process mining help in deploying AI and piloting and finding the best value out of AI? And I also thought of and the thing is with process mining, they're looking at the steps that are already automated and they're in a system. And typically these are the one where the human element isn't the deciding factor, because you have certain business rules and clear, let's say, transactional functions that apply. Now, and I think the classic example there that you can look at is maybe procurement. So creating a purchase requisition and even approving a purchase requisition, if you have the vendor in place and then you issue the purchase order and you get the invoice and you match the invoice against whatever goods goods receipt you receive, it's all, let's say, already digitalized, it's all there.
Yeah.
And so if you look at process mining, you see maybe some bottlenecks and you see some things that maybe you can identify maverick buying and stuff like that. But then the stage, everything that you do not see in the process mining, what is happening outside of the system. So when somebody is formulating his purchase requisition, when the purchasing manager is actually using this purchase requisition to maybe create an RFP and selecting vendors. So there's so many tasks that you don't immediately see, but this is where, as you said, the human factor comes in. But there are certain heuristics on based their experience, how they deal with it.
Oh, absolutely.
Better, some worse. And I think that's also say from my background, looking back at my PhD, is actually, I see AI as a great potential to actually dig in and try to identify current processes and activities that happen outside of the system, so they are prone for digitalization, and the, let's say, near let's say, irrational or this complex decision making that is happening, gathering information, evaluating information on vendors, evaluating, say, say your requirements and compiling them to a substantial purchase or acquisition. These are tasks where AI can help. And if you go about it in a structured manner, what you are doing is you are looking into the black spots of a process that are not yet digitalized and formalized in a manner. There may be a policy, with thresholds, but ultimately it's the experience of people acting there. And I think it's a buying to say, look, we really want to gather and understand your knowledge, how you take decisions, how you work through this complex task of doing a research over web for possible providers of a certain service or a certain product, then getting together their information and mapping it against the requirements to see what it's super complex. But in these areas, you can then deploy assistants, maybe later agents, but you're looking at black spots currently from a process mining perspective and data perspective into the, let's say, black holes. And or like Iris was talking about, the workarounds. So, and they were saying there is great insight into the process if you look at where people are avoiding the system and they are using workarounds or they are doing things outside of the system because they are not currently digitalized. And here, going about it in a structured manner, like an excellence initiative, you would do in a normal process optimization from the procedure, but then reflecting this against the capabilities, but dissecting the logics and the heuristics typically that people apply to come from A to B in a certain, sometimes not I'm not saying erratic manner, but not always in a very stringent linear manner. So sometimes it's iterative, and you have like a certain kind of like knowledge that you gain, and then you come to the point where you take a decision. And I think that's where the big potential is, if you realize that the capacity and the capability of AI, even if it doesn't get deployed, is to tap into these areas where you have highly trained and experienced people covering for certain steps and activities in the process that typically aren't already digitalized.
But that would mean, if I look at, everybody knows I work for a company that basically states there's no AI without PI. So there is no artificial intelligence without process intelligence, which really goes into a lot of what you've been saying in the last couple of minutes, Russell. So if I dissect what process intelligence really is, it's basically the combination of process mining and process management. And process management is filling in the blanks where automation might not have occurred. So if you document the process, you document both the activities that are supported by a system and thus potentially mineable, but also all the activities that are still done manually, which of course is automation potential or maybe AI type of potential. And I would argue that your repository, your single source of truth from a process management perspective, acts as the guide rails within which AI needs to stay. The last thing you want an AI engine or an agent is to go outside the boundaries of your organization and starts making stuff up, which is, of course, what we saw in the early days of AI. It would be so immensely helpful at the moment that you say, I have a way of communicating with AI in my organization where I simply can ask a question and it will only look at everything that we've documented. And that we know either we mined it and we bring it in, or we've documented it manually. But ultimately, that is the business context which provides AI with what it needs to know. And I'll give you a very simple example. You can ask an AI engine to create a process based on the name of a process. It's fine. But it does so based on what it takes from the internet. And it comes up with something that's probably 90% accurate, but it's way too generic. And what it's missing basically is, but for these type of situations, we have this policy in place. And for that situation, this is the work instruction that we have. That's the information that AI is really good at analyzing immense amounts of data, much better than humans are. So I see a tremendous potential for AI, but it needs to be, I would say, contained and guided by your business context, aka process intelligence.
And process intelligence, yeah. Okay, I'm with you on the process intelligence and the business context. The question is, how do you actually establish this framework of business context in a manner that it can go in? So what I see around process management in the traditional way is that it's to a certain extent it's even in the context of your business. So I'm not talking about let's say just a common book of, let's say APQC as a very generic, like say comprehensive book of processes and capabilities. So it's a fantastic framework, but it's not really give you the specific context of how you work in your company. But even there, I think the classical approach on the process documentation is for these decisions that people do, it's still too generic. It's like a template how you want to work, but
it's
to really dig into, say, creating an assistant that really helps you, you have to give an even deeper insight into the rules and regulations. So here, the minimum would be that you have then SOPs and policies and everything that you have in place, have that accessible. And I believe that that's still in a lot of companies, maybe pharmaceuticals more than in others because they have a lot of working instructions in place. But I know a lot of companies that have their audits and certifications, and they also have a lot of very detailed instructions and training documents and everything like that. That's getting there. And now in the past, there was always this, that's a lot of work. Yeah, how are we going to get this all modeled and documented?
Yeah.
And that's where, as you were saying about the big amount of capability to analyze a lot of data, that's where, again, a game changer is there, because you need the business context from the process management as a framework, but you can, if you have your vast amount of work instructions and your training documents and your guidelines, you don't have to meticulously dissect them and link each bit and bob to a process and an activity step. That's something that Gen AI can take over in a great manner by linking this. Yeah.
Let me ask you a question on that, because that's an interesting one, and I certainly don't disagree with you. Now, imagine I have a vast collection of describing documents, work instructions, training materials that I simply open up to AI. If I have not upfront figured out that if we call a certain role X in one document and we call it Y in the other one, even AI will not find a connection between the two. You need to do some kind of rationalization, I would say, in saying I'm gonna unify some of the characteristics and variables that I have in my collection set. Otherwise, it's going to be. I mean, I totally believe that AI can figure out that if I call somebody a accounts payable officer and the other one is an accounts payable clerk, that we probably will talk about the same role, but you're still running a risk that AI will not uncover the actual links that are there, that you will find if you are, let's say, forced to formalize it a little bit more. So
yeah.
Even if I
it's
agree
a
that you
good
don't
example.
need...
I once had for Professor Cheroun, I had this, keynote, and in the prompts, he had a lot of models with SAP, and then I did prompts with ERP. Yeah, and of course, then the assistant was understood that if I'm talking ERP and I find only models with everything was saying SAP, that he concluded, ERP is SAP, and then he jumped onto it. So, and he was doing some quite smart, like bridging the gap, and there were typos. He can, understand also it's not EPR. I think you mean ERP, and ERP is an SAP is an ERP. So, then he just they said, didn't even discuss it. He just continued doing quite a good job. Okay. So there is that aspect that it can help, that you don't have to, as I said, be build up a really super compliant and structured.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you are right. It will be shit in, shit out. And what I see with a lot of pilots, they were saying, yeah, but they're doing this, and they've already taken the process models and they've imported them and they're providing like an assistant. I said, yes, but so when did they last import them? What status did these processes have? Were they the as is or the to be or whatever? And they said, don't know. They just pull something. So if you want to really transform your company, then let's say, I know it sounds trivial, but if you have then somewhere, let's say a department doing AI, and you have no governance over which travel policy they've actually put into their chatbot, and in the meantime, I'm just taking the most primitive example, but the travel policy has changed, then somehow you need to get everybody to understand this is the new baseline, and also the AI. So, and that's one, maybe the primitive one. But when we're talking about processes, how many processes are we talking about? Which SOPs are valid? Which ones have to be reworked because the new compliance rule has come out that you have to retrain your people? How do we ensure that this all works? And without having the solid framework of your processes as a framework, and the governance over it, that you will then be able to say, in which context do we want to deploy AI to get a return? So, like, let's say the pilot, and how do we ensure that the data, and this is where data quality and technological infrastructure is super important, just as well as the governance, the ownership, and the compliance view on it. How do we ensure that this system, once it's validated, is still updated regularly and tested? So I think you need certain, like a risk and control thought on each AI that you have, but not just in a general manner, but you have to have it specifically for your application. You have to say, what are the risks? What are the ethical aspects of it? How far does data quality impact, and how do we ensure the updating and the maintenance of the infrastructure to ensure the quality over time? All things with any system, any application you implement, no brainer, you do it, or you have to do it.
No, for sure. Well,
and so we're just applying the common sense like aspects on doing things right, and not being so naive to say you just, once it's been piloted properly once, then what does deployment mean? How do we make this work on a bigger scale? How do I roll out a pilot on a global language? Our procurement system is really fantastic. Can we implement it in Hungary? Hungarian language. We have to revalidate that, see the data and the vendors. And then all of a sudden, you're in the same topics you have with any process rollout and deployment. That you have to put it under, and the success factors we've talked about, the beginning of our journey. And also the typical transformation, like thoughts and streams and aspects you have to take into consideration. So that's where I'm missing, is that the approach is that purely technology based. Let's come up with a fantastic result in a very dedicated pilot environment, but nobody's in parallel been really, well, not saying everybody. I've seen some customers that are really, really good on this, but that's where I said I've tapped in and said, wow, if you do it like that, it can work, but it takes longer and it's more effort, but it will play out on the long run. But you have to go about it like any initiative that you want to put onto an enterprise global level. You have to think about all these success factors that we also talk about when we talk about process management.
So what you described in the last couple of minutes is something that I think every organization runs into. I mean, it is called management of change. You can describe anything, including all of the AI agents and all of the AI engine that you put on top of it. But at the moment something changes somewhere, you need to do an impact analysis to see what else do I need to change. Now, I guess, and it's my belief, that if you have your repository a bit more formalized and in order, and it could be, of course, enriched with a lot of documents that you have left and right, performing an impact analysis, if you need to change something, is something that AI should be very, very, very capable of, to do it really quickly and say, listen, if I need to change this particular application because of whatever reason, it might be regulation, it might be in a continuous improvement request, whatever, AI should be very capable of saying, well, I've analyzed this particular object. It's used in these 5 processes. These 5 processes use these 27 other objects. So first order, second order impact. I mean, and just spit out a report that says, yeah, this is the potential impact based on the value that we think we're going to create with this change request. I would advise to do it, or I would advise not to go there. Mm-hmm. But it does require that you do your proper management of change. And on top of that, and I think that there's a difference between a regular AI engine and AI agents. To me, AI agents are nothing more than just another actor in the process. And you need to include them in your communication. You need to include them in your management of change. You need to include them in everything else, but they're not special. They're just another responsible person for an activity or activities in the process.
Yep. And yeah. So where I'm just thinking about the jump from, and I think it's like an evolution to a certain extent. I think you will have to or want to start off more with real dedicated systems that you try to narrow down and get more and more, let's say, sophisticated in taking over more and more of the actual task, that then the active role from an assistant turns into an agent, and the human is then for the, let's say, for validating, controlling, monitoring, and retraining. So there is a shift in the role. So where before you would have somebody operating the machine and really pressing all the buttons, and then he becomes like an operator monitoring the MES system that is actually, where before you would fill it and press all the buttons, that's all done automated. And we have to clearly think about a transition there, not just for the sake of, let's say, the people involved, because they have to embrace and they have to embark on a journey where they understand that there's certain things they should. It's like having a digital assistant coming on board, they were doing a lot of things themselves. They with the assistant, they're just asking him for his advice, and he says, it says if he takes it or not, it's purely up to the human. But then it's like it's shifting to a delegation to the agent. But I don't think that maybe some trivial things, but the more complex tasks, it is a real journey where you have to take into consideration a real grace period where you have the complete autonomy of an agent versus the pure assistant. That is something where you cannot define exactly how long it will take and to which extent it will be completely, you want to make it completely autonomous in its decision making. I would always have like a classical risk and control view on this, where I would also define the tests of, regularly you have to do, a test on the results and monitor them, and, and then really just, Stichproben, jump into it, and
sample test.
You will not want to do that just even down the road, when they are quite established. I would always have like this risk control view on this until you really have a very, very, and I don't think it will ever really get to the level that you it's like an IT system that has a very clear defined function. The AI will always be partly like a human. There will always be this potential failure that can happen, because the results will never be, they're never one-to-one reproducible. And every time the model is retrained or it's updated, anything like that, you're going back to, it's better now, but are the results in my context better? Or is it becoming too clever? And now is it kind of doing things that, no, I don't think I'm going to look at the vendors that have got a contract. I was thinking it would be much better for the company to select new vendors. And that's why and you said, why would you do that? I said, well, I'm really clever. I said, but seriously. And so becoming more and more evolved doesn't eliminate us as humans being involved and taking ultimate accountability and responsibility for the outcome of these agents. And that is the role that we have to be. So, you're not, turning the machine or filling the machine yourself, but you are now on another level of actually monitoring the automations that are doing it. And this we have to, for a lot of roles that haven't been touched by these decades of automations.
Yeah.
We're tapping into the we call it last mile, but into areas where even before they didn't even document the processes properly, they haven't even tapped into the knowledge and the procedures really, because there was no case for optimization or digitalization. Yeah, so that's why if you look at the process map, you go to order to cash and purchase to pay. Every company has detailed process models, and they're optimizing there, and they're turning out. And that's all the, say, blue-collar like level of processes. Yeah. But the white-collar level of, have you documented your strategy process? No.
Yeah, not so much.
Yeah. Have you, how is your, HR processes? Let's talk about recruiting. That's a different topic. We can talk about that sometime. How to do it. No, but HR processes and stuff like that. So, and some of them, payslip, etc., highly automated, highly well documented. But there's some areas that are just kind of like,
Yeah, I agree.
That's where the potential is. So process management in the context of these initiatives, I think it's theoretically it's a no-brainer. I think it's super essential because it brings together the human aspects, the IT aspects, the data aspects, and looks at them under the context of how to sustainably establish and roll them out throughout an organization. And that's why, I said, I'm really thankful for this series that Will is bringing out, because I think it's bringing the discussion to the people that need to think about it more than just from the technological perspective of it. And he's definitely bringing awareness to the whole process aspect of AI that I think is also needs to be looked at much more in detail.
So I would say that in the near future, we try to get Will on the show again, ask him. But I think in the meanwhile, next week, when we record next week, we're going to have Professor Dr. Ingenieur Professor Hajo Reyers on the show. Let's ask him what he thinks about this in light of the big BPM conference that took place in the first week of September in Seville in Spain. So that I think is exciting. We need to wrap this up, Russell, in order not to bore people to death too much. We just want to keep them alive that they tune in for the next episode. One shout out I would really need to do. Would like to do a shout out to our colleagues Roland and JM from the What's Your Baseline podcast, and they're being included in the Millions podcast listing as the number 1 podcast for BPM and EA, and also number, I think, 75 on the Strategy Execution podcast, which is really well done, guys. Congratulations from the BPM 360 podcast crew. Having said that, Russell, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, and speak to you next time.
Speak to you soon. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.